Hi, my name is Brian Dahlman. My wife Kathy and I lead the YACS group here at Maranatha Baptist Church. That's the young adults in college and career. For those who regularly attend our class, obviously don't need that introduction, but hopefully there are some that I haven't had a chance to meet yet, whether you've attended Maranatha but haven't had a chance to join us in our class, or maybe you haven't attended Maranatha at all. Hopefully, when things settle down a little bit, I can meet some new folks that come to me and say, "Hey, I saw your video and it didn't scare me away, so I wanted to come meet you." So hopefully that happens. That's definitely our ultimate goal here at Maranatha Baptist Church and with Pastor Lopez especially. Obviously, we need to make sure our physical needs are being met and our physical health is intact, but it's just as important, if not more important, for our spiritual health to be on point and maintain that spiritual aspect of things also. So I really do appreciate you taking some time and joining us. And like I said, hopefully we get a chance to worship together here again in the very near future. First off, I wanted to talk about really fear. That's probably the biggest thing that I've noticed over the last week and a half is just the fear that so quickly grabs people as a result of media, as a result of politics, um, maybe social media, maybe it's family members. But you hear people talk, you see panic, and it's so evident with simply toilet paper. I just say those two words, and normally it would mean absolutely nothing. But today, it has a whole different meaning than it did a week ago. It's just crazy. It's crazy the fear that has gripped people right now, and that fear can come in a lot of different forms. Maybe it's just simply just straight up fear. You're afraid of what's going to happen. Maybe it's in the form of anxiety. We just had an anxiety seminar here at Maranatha a few weeks ago, and we understand that anxiety is a serious threat to our nation, to so many people. It can really destroy so many lives and keep your relationship with God from being what it needs to be. So maybe that's your form of fear. Maybe it's discouragement. You know, going through hard times like this, it's change, it's different. It requires us to do things that we've never had to do before. That can be discouraging, and there's a lot of forms, a lot of factors that play into that discouragement. So maybe that's what you're faced with right now. Maybe it's just high levels of stress. You know, maybe you're not anxious over certain things. Maybe you don't suffer from anxiety, but maybe you're stressing about in different areas that really impacting you and again affecting your relationship with God, but also with those around us. So I want to take a few minutes to start with and talk about what the Bible says about fear. There are so many verses, so many passages that discuss fear and how a believer should respond to fear. Deuteronomy 3 and verse 8 is the first one that I've got here. And the Lord, He it is that doth go before thee. He will be with thee, He will not fail thee, neither forsake thee. Fear not, neither be thou dismayed. So many passages throughout the Bible are some paraphrase of that verse. And unfortunately, even for a believer, it's easier said than done to put your faith in Christ, to not be afraid, to not fear the unknown. Um, but we have to. That's the only way we can get through times like this. Put your faith in Christ. There is nothing we are going through right now that God didn't know we were going to be going through. There is nothing that we're going to be faced with that God didn't already provide a solution for it, as long as we're keeping our eyes on Him and we can see what that solution is. It really is about perspective. And if you can put your faith, your trust in Him, understanding God will get us through this, we're going to be just fine. Another verse, Psalm 18:2, and this is a psalm that was written by David. The Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, my God, my strength, in whom I will trust, my buckler and the horn of my salvation and my high tower. So for those who maybe haven't grown up in church, maybe you don't know all the Bible stories that a lot of regular church attenders know, King David, he wrote this psalm prior to being king. The current king of Israel wasn't a fan of somebody else taking his place. And David had to, he literally feared for his life. Most of us probably are not in that point where we are fearing for our life. Now, granted, there are already a lot of people who have passed away from COVID 19. There will be plenty more that do. But for this life stage group, probably not a lot of us are fearful for our lives. And if you really take into consideration that David was fearing for his life, and yet he could put his trust in God, man, why can we not do the same thing going through something like this? Again, it's easier said than done, but David could do it. And there's no reason why we can't have that same faith. Another verse, John 14:27. Peace I leave with you, my peace I give unto you. Not as the world giveth, give I unto you. Let not your heart be troubled, neither let it be afraid. Again, it's another verse that paraphrases or is another form of Deuteronomy 3:8. But I love that first word of John 14:27, peace. If there's one thing that we've seen over the last week and a half, it's certainly not peace. Stores, people are fighting over toilet paper. It just blows my mind. The panic that has gripped people. And the furthest thing from most people right now is peace. I went to Dutch Bros this morning, and my wife was getting a drink. And there was a police officer sitting in the parking lot. Crazy lines, cars through the drive-through, even the walk-up window. And it was pretty crazy lines. And there's a police officer sitting out there in the parking lot. And I walked up to him, and I said, hey, you here just maintaining the peace, or what's going on? And he said, yeah. And the police have been out there every day. They will continue to be out there every day just to monitor things. And it's crazy. You know, I told him, I was like, I get fighting over toilet paper because there is none. But Dutch Bros, like coffee, we got plenty of options for coffee. But that's where our world is at right now. And people are fighting over everything, and it's crazy. God is a God of peace. And that's where, again, we need to put our faith and trust in him. He's not a God of chaos. He's not a God of panic. He is a God of peace. We really need to grab that truth and let peace guide us through these troubling times. Another verse, 1 John 4:18, a different perspective on fear. But 1 John 4:18, there is no fear in love, but perfect love casteth out fear, because fear hath torment. He that feareth is not made perfect in love. There is no fear in love. God loves us. You will not see any greater picture of love than what God has done for us. How much do we love God? If we love God the way we're supposed to, fear shouldn't be an issue in any way. Like this verse says, perfect love casteth out fear. God's casted out fear. We need to do the same thing. Don't be afraid. Don't let these times discourage you. Don't let these times get you anxious. Don't let these times drive you to craziness. Don't let it happen. Guard your heart, guard yourself, guard your mind. Fear is not a bad thing. God created fear. God put fear in each one of us. It's a very healthy aspect of our life, and it's a necessary aspect of our life. However, when we let that fear get out of control, then it becomes a sin. Kind of a silly example of this, and I talked to my wife about it before I'm sharing this, but my wife, Kathy, when she was young, a little girl, she was at her aunt's house, and she ran and jumped into her pool at her aunt's house. And apparently her aunt had sharks on the bottom of the pool, painted, whatever, I don't know. But my wife jumped in as a little girl, looked down and saw these sharks. Freaked her out. Jumped out of the pool screaming. To this day, she has a fear of sharks. Now, she is able to go in a pool now without worrying too much about it. But just last summer, we were at a lake here in Arizona, and we were jet skiing, and she fell off the jet ski into the water, and she panicked a little bit. Fresh water, there's no sharks, there's no fish in there that are going to do anything like what a shark does, but she panicked because of this fear that she has of sharks. And we lived in Florida for a while, in Pensacola, and there's a healthy fear of sharks there. There are guidelines that you abide. You don't swim at dusk or at dawn, as those are prime feeding times for sharks. You don't swim near the pier because there's a lot of other fish that are by the pier. There's a lot of guidelines that we can follow to avoid any issues with sharks. But to this day, she is deathly afraid of sharks. Yet at the same time, she loves Shark Week every year. I don't know what's up with that. Um, but she has a healthy fear of sharks. And I'm sure we all do. And again, this is kind of a silly example. But if she weren't able to overcome a fear of sharks and jump in a swimming pool, we got a problem. And again, like I said, it's a silly example, but that's kind of where we're at with this uh, COVID-19 that we're faced through as a country. We have to respect it. There is a time and place for fear. There is a need for fear in our lives. And we'll talk about some things at the end of this as far as common sense things that we definitely need to do, a healthy respect that you have for COVID-19. Um, but don't let that fear run your life. We don't know how long it's going to be. Maybe it's going to be a few weeks. Maybe it's going to be a few months. Hopefully, it's not much longer than that. But what are you going to let this do to your life over the coming weeks, over the coming months? This is a new experience for all of us. We can decide to let fear control us and take over our lives for the foreseeable future, or we can have a healthy respect for what it really is and take proper precautions and find ways to make ourselves better through all of this. So that's step number one, is don't let fear take charge of your life. Some other aspects that I wanted to discuss that I think really relate to this life stage group, young adults. We think we're invincible, and I say we. I'm 41. Most people in our class are in their 20s, maybe early 30s, so a little bit different. But talking with most of the people in our class, there's honestly probably not enough fear through this. You're just going to keep doing what you want to do. I've heard people complain that movie theaters are shut down. Are you kidding me? What are we supposed to do with our lives? We can't go watch a movie. We can't go bowling. Restaurants are closed. We can't go out to eat with our friends. There's so many things that a healthy fear has driven us to do as a country, and we're complaining about those things. And I get it. It's definitely frustrating. It really is. I've got 4 little kids myself, and I work from home. I've been doing that for 3 years, but my kids normally go to school. For the last week, 2 weeks ago, we were on spring break, so I had that week with them. This last week, school was canceled, so I got a little extra time with the kids. And it's not going to take long before I'm really ready for them to go back to school. But that's something that I have to deal with. I can let that run my life and be discouraged by it, or I can adjust and just make changes that need to be made. One thing that we really have to make sure to take seriously is the government, obeying the government's directions. There's a lot of things that the government has said, mandating restaurants be closed, the seating areas. The government might institute not necessarily curfews, but you can only leave your house to go to the store, to go for healthcare treatment, different things like that, for emergencies. It's very possible something like that could happen. There's a lot of things that the government is telling us to do, suggesting that we do to help prevent the spread of COVID-19. It's very, very important that we take those things serious as well. Don't look at it as I'm invincible. This thing's not going to knock me down. If it does hit me, it's not going to kill me. It's not that big a deal. It's the flu. There's a lot of different aspects to that, but we need to make sure we are abiding by what the government is directing us to do. Romans 13, verses 1 and 2. Let every soul be subject unto the higher powers, for there is no power but of God. The powers that be are ordained of God. Whosoever therefore resisteth the power, resisteth the ordinance of God, and they that resist shall receive to themselves damnation. The Bible gives a lot of verses, passages, again, that talk about government and following those that have the rule over us. God has put those people in place. We have to trust that God will give them wisdom and guidance to get us through these hard times. Luke 20, verse 25. And he said unto them, render therefore unto Caesar the things which be Caesar's, and unto God the things which be God's. Now that particular passage is talking about taxes. Do we give Caesar our taxes, or should we just give it to the church? And Jesus flat out says, there are things that belong to the government. You need to give that to the government. And this is one of those things. The government is is going to be in a little bit more control than they normally are. And that's okay. It's not a bad thing. Again, God put people into place. We as believers need to be okay with that. And again, know that God knows what he's doing. Trust God that he's got the right people that can guide us and steer us through these hard times. 1 Peter 2, verses 13 and 14. Submit yourselves to every ordinance of man for the Lord's sake, whether it be to the king as supreme, or unto governors, as unto them that are sent by him, for the punishment of evildoers, and for the praise of them that do well. The first word here of 1 Peter 2, verse 13, submit. Our job as Americans is to submit to government. Our job as Christians is to submit to authority. First authority being God. But again, there are a lot of levels of authority that he's given us that we have to submit to. There will be times that we think they're making the wrong decision. And there's a lot of times where they are making the wrong decision. But again, it comes down to your faith in God. God will get us through all of these things. We have to trust him. It's our job to worship God by submitting rather than just doing what we want to do, whether we think it's right or not. Our theme for Maranatha this year is worship. And there's so many aspects of worship, so many ways we can worship. This is definitely one of those ways that we can worship God. And that's by making the right choice of following leadership that he has put in place. It could be also leadership that you have at work. I know there's a lot of people who are working from home. There are people who still have to go into the office. My wife is a nurse. She has to go into the hospitals when she goes to work. There are people who have lost their jobs as a result of this. There are people in our group who are looking for a job, whether it be a job change or just any job because they're unemployed right now. And this has put a halt on all of those things. But there's so many different ways, again, we can look at this. We can get discouraged. We can get upset. We can get mad. Or we can take opportunities and grow our faith, grow our relationship with Christ, and just keep moving forward the way he wants us to. God has placed authority figures in our lives. We are to honor those leaders and respect them, even when they make those bad decisions. Pray for our leaders. Can't stress that enough. If you haven't taken time over the last couple of weeks to pray for a president, pray for the health organization, pray for governors, mayors, those who are implementing local law, pray for them. God can move their hearts in a way none of us can. Pray. I'm not sure we have any leaders in government today that have gone through something like this. Maybe there are. This is new territory for most of us, if not all of us. None of us are immune, despite what you might think. Please, please, please follow the guidelines that are being given to us by federal and local government, and don't think any of us are immune to any of these things. The next point that I wanted to chat about. Sorry, there's not very good transitions in here. I'm not a formal speaker. So, Pastor, if you're watching this, don't judge me based on my transitions because I don't have any good transition statements. But the third thing that I wanted to chat with about today is what can we do with all of our free time? You know, like I said, most of us are probably not going into an office right now, whether it be you're working from home or you aren't working at all right now. This is probably a time that you've never experienced, at least not since you were a kid. If you are an adult, you've got a job, you've got responsibilities. Outside of a week of vacation here and there, it's rare that you have this much free time that we're going to have. So I want to chat about some things, maybe offer some suggestions on things that we can be doing, you know, again, over the next couple of weeks, maybe over the next couple of months. If you are working from home, work to the best of your ability. You know, again, we talked about that at church. We're going through worship, and one way that we have to worship God is in the workplace. And to worship God in the workplace is simply do the best job you can do. Our focus should be on honoring God through our jobs. Don't just have the mindset that you don't need to do your best because you're not in the office every day. Like I said, I've been working from home for the last 3 years, and it's tough. It definitely takes some adjustments. And there are days where I don't want to work. There are days that I just want to take some time off. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But as a whole, you still have a job to do. You're still getting paid by your employer. And if you're not, man, enjoy the time off. We'll talk about some other aspects of it. But as far as this goes, make sure you're doing the best you can do within your job when you're supposed to be working. Reconnect with family members. This is something that, maybe you've had a day or two to do in the past. When I lived in Pensacola, Florida, we regularly got hurricanes that came through, caused a lot of damage. And that's actually the first long conversation I had with my wife. We weren't dating, we were just friends. And we ended up talking for a couple hours on the phone. Fast forward all these years, I've been married for 18 years to her. And it was a way that her and I connected because of that hurricane, because of this downtime. And without that, who knows? Maybe I wouldn't be married to her. But God used that situation to bring us closer together and eventually bring us to where we're at today. But take that time. If you've got some free time, there's no doubt in my mind, you're not the only one in your family who's going to have some of this free time. Maybe maybe you're in a situation where your family lives across the country. We definitely have people in our group who are out here in Arizona by themselves. Your family lives in Idaho. Your family lives in Massachusetts. Your family lives anywhere else. Then there's others who live with their family still. We've got several young adults who live at home, and they very independent, but they have the opportunity to be able, to stay at home and take advantage of that situation. So a lot of different situations that you could be in, but take advantage of this. Connect with your family. Call your parents. Call your mom. Call your dad. Talk to them for an hour. Talk to them for 2 hours. Call a brother. Call a sister. Maybe it's a cousin, an aunt and uncle, grandparents. I can guarantee you, if you have grandparents that you maybe don't get to connect to very often, I can guarantee you they would love to talk to their grandkid for an hour, for 2 hours. Show them that you love them. That's the one thing I think this will give all of us that we don't normally have is time. Use that time to your benefit. Mend relationships, strengthen relationships, reconnect with people in our lives, whether it's just talking to them on the phone for a couple of hours to reconnect or spending time with family members if you do still live at home. Get off of social media, or we'll be spending a lot more time in the future weeks on point number one. Don't be afraid. Social media will drive you to fear. And just spend time talking, playing games, maybe praying and doing devotions together. It's been a long time. When I was a kid growing up, we would go through phases, and there were periods of time where we didn't do devotions at all as a family. This is a chance for you to reconnect on that level, on a spiritual level, maybe in a way that you've never been able to before. Maybe it's not devotions, but just pray. If you have family around you, take some time every day, pray with them. Let that draw you closer, not only to each other, but draw you closer to God. Man, prayer can do so many amazing things if we do it. I can't stress that enough. Spend some time praying in all this downtime. Another thing we can do, we've been talking about boundaries in our class for a while. Take some time to really self-reflect and discover what are some of those areas that you might need to put boundaries in with your family, work, your friends. Maybe it's not a relationship at all. Maybe it's your own personal choices that you need to set some new boundaries in. But for those of us who have been in our class for a while, going through this boundaries book, if you haven't had a chance to do it in the past, I can guarantee you're going to have some free time. Take some time, self-reflect, determine what areas you need to have these boundaries in your life, and how can we put these boundaries into place. Have those conversations with your family members during this downtime. You will have time to talk through things, to work through things. Do that. Don't forget about these boundaries that we've been talking about and the need for boundaries just because we aren't meeting together as a class. Proverbs 6, verses 6 through 11. Go to the ant, thou sluggard, consider her ways and be wise, which having no guide, overseer, or ruler, provideth her meat in the summer, and gathereth her food in the harvest. How long wilt thou sleep, O sluggard? When wilt thou rise out of thy sleep? Yet a little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to sleep. So shall thy poverty come as one that traveleth, and thy want as an armed man. Proverbs 6. You've probably heard that verse before in a lot of different ways. A lot of times it's working, physical work. Go to the ant, thou sluggard. I've never heard an instance where an ant takes time off because something bad happens. I know for a fact when I destroy an anthill, you see a lot of ants that are working hard, that are scrambling to fix the problem, to rebuild what was just destroyed, what was just broken. There's a lot of wisdom in that, which we could say that about all the Proverbs and the whole Bible, obviously. But during this time, our lives are thrown into chaos. Our lives can be thrown into turmoil. What are you going to do with that? You can do a lot to grow, obviously spiritually, some of these things, but also take some time and see what you can do to grow professionally. Reading a book, and I'm not talking about fiction. Valya, I don't know if you're watching this, but Valya writes a lot of books, and there's a lot of good books that she's done. I'm not talking about a fiction. Obviously, hopefully you read some fiction, but read some books that can help you. Read some good Bible-based books that can help you grow spiritually. Read some books that are based on your profession. Read some books that can help you take that next step in your career. Maybe it's motivational books. Maybe it's something that you've never done but you've been interested in doing. Read something on that. Look up some stuff online. Study. We're never too old to learn. Never too old to learn. Take some of this time. Advance yourself on a professional level. And, for those who are looking for work, what do you want to do? I've had conversations with some of you. What direction do you want to have in your life? Where do you want to go? Where do you want to be in 5 years, in 10 years? Now's a great time to help figure some of that stuff out. Even if you are working from home, you're still going to have a lot of free time at nights. Put a plan into place. What can you do not only to grow spiritually, but how can we grow personally, professionally? Take a look at that and give yourself a map. One thing I've done with a couple of people in our class is we sit down. What are some areas that you're struggling with right now? On a personal level, again, it'll take some self-reflection, but what are some areas that you're struggling in? And they'll list several different areas. Okay, now what's the most important area? What's number one thing you want to change right now? Okay, this issue. All right, now let's talk about that. Set aside all these other things. Let's talk about this one thing. What are the problems? Symptoms, whatever you want to call it. What's going on? And let's write that down. I don't like this. I don't like this. I don't like this. I have a problem with this. Okay, great. Write all those things down. Now let's go to number one of that. Your first problem is this. How can we fix it? Not do this, implement these things. Okay, perfect. Now, how do we do that? Break it down, break it down, break it down, break it down. Get all the way down to the nuts and bolts of it. Give yourself a map. When you drive somewhere you've never been before, pretty much everybody now, I don't know anybody who uses a paper map. Maybe there are some that do, but anybody watching this video is probably not using a paper map anymore. You're going to pull up your navigation on your phone. And it's so easy. I know people who have lived in a city for 10, 15 years, and they still pull up everything on the map just because that's what they do. It's just habit. Let's just do that so we know where we're going. And you follow that to get where you want to go. When it comes to our lives, why do we expect anything different with our lives? Put a map into place. Break it down step by step by step. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. And in order to do those things, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. Break it down so you have an easy map to follow. That is something definitely everyone should be doing during downtime right now. Take advantage of this free time that you have in your life and put together that plan. Maybe you already know where you want to go. Maybe you're far enough along in your career that in 5 years, you want to be here. You want to be here in 10 years. You want this. Okay, what are some personal things that maybe you want to change? Let's work on those things. What are some things that you don't like? What are some things that maybe it's a hobby? Maybe it's something you want to pick up. Take this time instead of moping and focusing on all these things that we can't do right now. I can't go to a movie. I can't go bowling. I can't do this. Okay, what can we do? It's all about your mindset. Don't let discouragement take place of the things that we can't do. Focus on positive. What can we do to better ourselves through all of this? The last thing I wrote down here that we absolutely 100% should be doing, and I've already stressed it once, pray. Pray, pray, pray for God's wisdom, God's direction in your life to make sure you are making the right decisions. Ask for God's protection over your health, over your family's health, your friends' health. Ask for protection for our government, for our leaders. Ask for wisdom and guidance. There's just so many things that we can be praying about right now. Do that. Do that. Spend time reading your Bible. Draw closer to God through this time, and everything else, honestly, it won't matter. I can guarantee you, if you are spending time with God, it's going to make it so much easier to get through all this other craziness. Those are just some ideas, some things you can do during your free time. The last thing I wanted to go over, and I wrote down in my notes, I just titled it Common Sense. I'm amazed at the lack of common sense I have seen in so many people over the last week. Again, we talk about toilet paper. Enough said. There's a lack of common sense. Number one, wash your hands. You know, it's simple. It seems crazy. People are like, I wash my hands. Wash them more. Whatever you're doing, wash your hands. Personal hygiene. Stay clean. When you go somewhere, wash your hands. You know, when we go to the store, we're disinfecting the carts. We're doing all this stuff now. Make sure we're staying clean. I see people with face masks. I see people doing stuff in gloves. Whenever my kids do anything, you know, I haven't let them go to the park the last week because who knows what's flying around at the park. You know, we ride our bikes. We still get out. We exercise. We do things as a family. But there's a lot of things that just use common sense. And it will help this whole issue pass sooner rather than later. Don't go to highly populated areas. You know, again, we talk about restaurants being closed, theaters being closed, obviously sporting events being closed. That's okay. It's okay. I think it helps give us perspective on the things that really do matter, but just avoid those highly populated areas. One thing I've learned through research, you know, depending on the surface, this specific virus can last up to 3 days on certain surfaces. Don't assume anywhere you go is germ-free. Again, it's common sense things, but I'm amazed that so many people lack these areas. Don't think you're immune to it. Don't think you aren't susceptible to what's going on. Just use that common sense. Avoid places that you just don't need to go to. Don't touch things, you know, and I've got 4 little kids. I'm constantly telling them, don't touch that handrail. Don't do that. Don't go over here. Great. Go wash your hands again. It's just crazy. But as a parent, that's the things that I need to do. If you're watching this, you probably, I'm going to assume most people watching this are not a parent, but you're probably more in the kid category. There's probably a lot of things that you're going to do that you just don't think about, that you just take for granted. Think about those things. Just be careful what you're doing, where you're going, what you're touching. It's not about as much about you, as most of us are probably not at high risk, but who will you be in contact with? That's something that I'm constantly thinking about, especially with my kids. My parents live here. My wife's parents live around us, and we're constantly interacting with them. I'm not worried about anything major happening to me if I get COVID-19. I'm not worried about my kids. If something happens, big picture, they're going to be fine. But if they interact with my parents, if they interact with my in-laws, they could have long-lasting impact by it. It could have detrimental effects to them. So think about that. Even though you may not be susceptible to anything major, think about who else you might come in contact with that is, and you might be a result of them getting sick, possibly even dying because of your carelessness or lack of just common sense. So think about those things. Another thing, and again, you know, a week late for most people, but don't panic. You know, right now it's so hard to find toilet paper. It blew my mind over a week ago when I heard how hard it is. I mean, just everybody is out of toilet paper. Blew my mind. I mean, apparently people forget we have other options besides just toilet paper. It's amazing, but don't panic. There's no reason for all of this. If you are in a spot where you need food, you need water, you need a roll of toilet paper, reach out to me. You know, we've got people at church that can help. We've got people that can really, if you seriously have a need and you cannot find the things that you need, you cannot get the things that you need, don't panic. Reach out to us, reach out to me, and we'll make sure you get what you need. We can help take care of that. Food and water will be available. If you really can't find those, there are other resources if you can't afford to go to the store and buy it, if you can't get it taken care of. But don't panic. That's where so much of these problems are being caused by, is simply people panicking, and it just throws us into utter chaos. And the last thing that I wrote down, and again, something that I've observed over the last week and a half, be patient. There are a lot of people who lack common sense. Maybe this isn't a problem for you. Maybe you haven't been afraid. Maybe you haven't panicked. Maybe you haven't had any of these issues. But maybe you need to be patient with people who are, and it's okay. It's okay for people to react this way. Um, it shouldn't be happening as much as it is, but unfortunately, that's the world that we live in right now. Be patient with people. Don't yell and scream. Don't need to honk your horn when somebody is doing something in their car that you don't like. Don't yell and scream when you're at the store. So just yesterday I was at one store and people were fighting over a parking space. There's plenty of parking spaces in the parking lot, but this one spot was closer to the door, and literally two cars were fighting over it, and somebody was trying to back out. And these other two cars are honking at each other because they want the space, and the car trying to back out couldn't back out because these two cars are fighting over it. It's unreal for a space that is literally 30 feet closer to the door. Exercise patience. That will go so far. That will help in so many ways for your own spirit, for your own anxiety, fear, whatever, but help other people relax as well. Um, Say hi to people. When you get in somebody's way, sorry about that. At stores that we've been to, it's amazing. I heard two different people like, hey, sorry, or excuse me, or something like that, and they're like, oh, well, that's a different reaction. I heard two different people say that, and it's crazy. It shouldn't be that way, but especially as Christians, that should be how it is all the time with us. Make sure over these next few weeks, next few months, however long we need to, be patient, use your manners, use common sense. So this is what I've got for today. Definitely different than what I was expecting, and I'm excited to see what's going to happen over the next few weeks. Like I said, if you have any questions at all, if you need anything, don't hesitate to reach out to us. I want to be here to help in any way I can, especially those that are in our YACC group. But maybe there's some that are interested in joining us down the road. Man, reach out if you need somebody to talk to, if you need somebody to bounce ideas off of, just whatever. Reach out, let us know, and we're going to be here to help out our community in any way we can. So look forward to, like I said, hopefully meeting some of you maybe in the future. In the meantime, be safe, be smart, and take care.